Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Sandy Smith, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Sergeant Jeanette McNeely. This evening, we warmly welcome the family of Private Vincent Wallis, whose story will be told shortly. We are honoured to acknowledge Lieutenant General Alphonse Mays, German Chief of Army, and Vice Admiral Carsten Stadwiski, German Director General of Armaments, accompanied by Lieutenant General Simon Stewart, Australian Chief of Army, Major General Jason Blaine, Head of Armoured Vehicles Australia, and the accompanying delegation. We warmly welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Vincent Wallis. Vincent Wallis was born in 1890 in the Victorian town of Daylesford. Known as Vinna, he was one of 6 children born to John and Elizabeth Wallis. He received his education at Daylesford State School and went on to become one of the town's star football players, taking part in competitions across the region. He later took up work as an apprentice gardener and was a member of the town's local fire brigade. At the outbreak of war in 1914, Vinna was working as a miner in the Western Australian town of Kalgoorlie. Vincent Wallis enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 10th of August 1915. He was assigned to reinforcements of the 28th Battalion and began a short period of training in Australia. He embarked for active service from Fremantle on the 2nd of November 1915 on board the troop ship Ulysses. After several months at sea, Private Wallis arrived in Egypt, where members of the AIF were prepared to embark for the Western Front. While training in March, he sustained an injury to his leg, which became infected, and he was admitted to the 3rd Australian General Hospital for treatment. He was briefly transferred to the 51st Battalion before joining the ranks of the 32nd Battalion in April. He embarked for France with his new unit in June, arriving in the port city of Marseille a week later. Wallis's unit was sent north to the Somme Valley, which had been the scene of intense fighting since 1914. The men travelled to the nursery sector, a comparatively quiet section of the front where new recruits were introduced to life in the trenches. Private Wallis took part in his first and only major battle of the war at Fromelles. The attack was intended as a feint to draw German troops away from the Battle of the Somme, which was taking place further south. The attack began on the 19th of July 1916, preceded by a 7-hour bombardment, which was designed to destroy the enemy lines and allow advancing troops to reach their objectives unopposed. The bombardment, however, only served to notify the enemy that an attack was coming. German troops took cover, and when the barrage lifted, they were ready. Allied troops advanced on their objectives in broad daylight and came under heavy fire, obstructed by the lengths of barbed wire which had not been cut by the bombardment. Signal Lewis Garnham recalled the attack at Fromelles. When we jumped the parapets, it was a case of crawling over dead men in the comm trench. After clearing the enemy out of their hidden spots, we made for their support trench, which was to be our new front. Then we started to dig, but our chaps fell in hundreds and we had to retire. During the night, the enemy got hundreds of reinforcements, and at dawn we found ourselves being attacked from both flanks and the front. There are sights in my mind I hope time will blot out, but I am afraid it will not. By the time the attack was called off, Australian units had suffered more than 5,500 casualties. In the aftermath of the battle, Private Vincent Wallis was missing. He remained listed as missing in action for more than a year, much to the growing anxiety of his family. In August 1917, a court of inquiry was held to determine his fate. In the absence of further news, it was ruled that Wallis must have been killed in action during the devastating attack on Fromelles. Vincent Wallis was 26 years old. Today, he is commemorated on the Australian Memorial at VC Corner amongst many other victims of Fromelles who have no known grave. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right amongst more than 62,000 Australians who died whilst serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Vincent Wallis, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.